When it comes to appraisals, people have a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of just misunderstandings that go on. So I wanted to come on here and talk about appraisals from kind of a bird's eye view, explain a little bit about what they are, why they happen, and, a little bit more about what it means when you get an appraisal back, whether it's value or, subject to. And I've actually had a couple of different appraisals come in this week. One came in at value and I had a question, and then one came back at value but subject to. So we're going to dive into all of that and more, and hopefully lay out exactly what the appraisal and what portion of the deal or where that comes into play. So stay tuned and we'll get rolling. If you don't know, I'm Jeremy Kane with eXp Realty. I have a YouTube channel called Living in the Denver Suburbs. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, all the things. I help people buy homes from Castle Rock to the Wyoming border right here in Colorado, but I am a part of a massive network. So if you are watching this from somewhere else and you would like me to be a part of your home buying or selling journey, I absolutely have the right real estate agent that I can connect you with, and I can be a little bit a part of that as well. But for now, we're talking appraisals. So follow me wherever you're at, like this video, give me the thumbs up, engage a little bit so I know you're here, and let's get down to business when it comes to appraisals. So appraisals are a tool that is used, they exist to provide one professional's opinion of value on a property. And so as we are talking about appraisals, we have to kind of dive in. Typically, when an appraisal is in motion, there's a lender or a group of people that are involved, right? So first things first, it's somebody comes out to the property. Typically, if it's a loan, they're hired by an appraisal management company. You as a homeowner or a home buyer can contract an appraiser directly. However, it's usually done within the loan process. If you're getting a loan, it will be a requirement in most cases, depending on where it's at. But the appraiser will come out, they'll take pictures of the property, they'll measure it, they're confirming condition while they're there, and then they also look at the comparables and provide a report with a bunch of pictures and a bunch of numbers and, essentially arrive at a value. The truth is that most appraisals that are attached to home purchases come in right around the contract price. The appraiser does have access to the contract. The appraiser is also kind of held liable if they have a crazy high appraisal and then, the loan defaults. The appraiser could be personally liable. So this is the reason why they kind of stick to that, There's usually not too much variance, so to speak, from my statistics days, within the purchase price of the contract and the purchase price of the appraisal. I have had appraisals come in, 5-10% higher sometimes based on good deals. I've had appraisals come in low. But typically an appraisal is when a third party non-biased opinion comes into play and gives us a valuation of the property. Now, there are certain appraisals for loans that have a little bit more stringent guidelines. And this is where you hear like the FHA and the VA and the government overlays and all the things that come into those amazing loan products. The appraiser is somebody who's going to just verify the condition for the lender as a third party non-biased opinion. And so they are verifying the condition of the property, especially in those government loans where it has to be livable, has to be, there's certain things that go with different loan types. The honest truth is most of them are pretty easy to meet. And I've had, homes that need some updating and need some work, get passed just fine. There are specific things that they look at, FHA, VA, and so on, but that's not what this is about. The truth is that ultimately, if you're purchasing a home with a loan, it needs to be livable, it needs to be, safe, and we need to make sure, and that's where this happens, is at the appraisal. And then the appraiser will go back, they'll look at the numbers, they'll, provide comparables, and they'll come up with a value. As long as that value is, within, above or at the contract price, everybody's happy. The lender will lend on the property. The buyer can buy it. The seller can sell it. It's all good. Now, that's where it kind of gets a little bit crazy. Some of the misconceptions, right? I had a client ask me today, well, this was a pretty good deal when we ran the numbers and when we were looking at it, and it came in at value. I said, the truth is, this is one person's opinion on this day, and it's going to come in somewhere near the contract value, right? We've all seen it. We've all known. Sometimes they do come in a little bit higher, but not always, right? Because the truth is, the home is worth what a buyer is willing to buy it for and a seller is willing to sell it for. So they do a pretty good job coming in at those values as they go. But they were a little bit concerned. They're like, well, we thought we were going to have a little bit of equity. And the truth is it's not like it carries over, first of all, and we'll talk about that in a second. But also, it's just one person's opinion of value on that day. If you went and got a different kind of loan, the government, FHA and VA appraisals do stick with the property for a certain amount of time. But say you switch from an FHA loan, you terminated the contract, decided to go back under contract with a conventional loan, could be a different appraisal completely. And it could come in at a different value, depending on that person's opinion. So it doesn't stick to the property at all. And I'll go into that in a second. That's the first thing. The next appraisal I had this week came back subject to, which we kind of knew. We wanted to get the appraiser out there, do the valuation, get it on their radar, because we actually had a hailstorm and they were getting siding replaced, and just so happened they're relocating. We had to put it on the market. They were doing the work the day the appraiser came, so there was actually no siding on the house when the appraiser came. So the appraiser came, took pictures, did his report, and it came back subject to the siding getting replaced. He could see that the workers were there. He could see that it was being done. It just happened to show up on that day. So he put in the report, the value is subject to the siding getting done. So they're going to come back out with the siding all pretty, it all painted up, and he will say, okay, remove the subject to, and we'll be off to the races. So there are a couple things that do come back. That is an FHA loan, so that is something that definitely would come up. It probably would have come up on a conventional appraisal too, because it was literally just Tyvek wrapped when they showed up. So that's the one thing. It's a verification of the condition of the home, and then they attach a value. So those are the two kind of things that came up this week. Now let's talk about, how the misconceptions that I often see. Oftentimes I hear people say, well, is this going to pass a VA inspection or an FHA inspection? Because it has that kind of government connotation that there is more strict guidelines. The truth is there are, but the inspection and the appraisal are very different. The inspection is information that you have. It's a report on that property. It's basically a, orientation for you on your home. The inspector does not have, connection to the lender, right? So that's a separate thing. The appraiser, when he comes out, they do call this an inspection, but it's a lot less invasive. He's not going to open up the furnace. He's not going to test for hot water, or they're not going to do any of that. But if there is obvious safety concerns, one time I had, a pipe running over a electrical outlet that was exposed. And they're like, yeah, we need to cap that. The appraiser caught that. She was just there doing it, and she took a picture of it and said, yeah, we need to do that. That was the subject to on that one. So as we're moving forward here, we're talking about the loan guidelines and those safety concerns and those things that will come up at the appraisal in the event that the appraiser notes it. The appraiser is at the property for approximately 30 to 40 minutes, and inspectors at the property for 3 hours. So that's kind of the difference. And it's not, an inspector isn't going to tell you that you're not going to be able to get an FHA or VA loan on the property because of XYZ, no handrails, no gutter extensions, no window coverings, chipping paint, those things. He may note those things on that property inspection, and then it's a good agent's responsibility to see that those things may, again, be brought up at the appraisal. Inspection happens, then we have the appraisal, so it's a lot closer to closing than the inspection. So it's important to make sure that we get ahead of some of these items if you are in one of those government loans. But it's not a big deal. That's the number one misconception, is inspection or appraisal. Now, for you as a client, as a buyer or a seller, it's important to pay attention and clue into these things and know what, if any, additional things are going to be, needed. as an agent, I know if I have a VA buyer and there's chipping paint that's super obvious everywhere, that could come up. I know that if there's exposed floor, or, there's a deep window well without a cover, that those are safety things that will be noted on those appraisals. So that's the biggest thing. But as a buyer, as a seller, it's important to have an agent on your side that understands this. For my sellers, I will talk about this at listing appointments. Hey, we can offer this as a VA and FHA if we do get one of those buyers to, if we do go under contract one of those buyers, we may have to do some quick paint on the trim. We may have to do this. So I'm able to market it to a larger number of buyers because we've had that conversation. Now, a lot of people just throw it out there, and then when we get there, they're like, oh, I don't know if we want to do that. So it's important to kind of go through all the options on the sell side, and as the buyer to be on the lookout, because if you have a home that they're saying it's as is, we're not doing anything, we don't have the ability to do things, an appraisal could require that it is actually painted, right, prior to closing instead of, anything else. So that's super important to understand, and that's kind of the difference when we dive into appraisals, buyer versus seller. But the biggest thing on appraisals that I want everybody to hear is one person's opinion of the value. So if you have a group of, family members, maybe someone passed away, this is another time when an appraisal is sometimes needed, when it's a group of people that need an unbiased opinion on the value, and they're going to divide it up a certain way, or, some people are going to buy other people out. It's really important to have that non-biased opinion as you go. So that's the only other time that appraisals really come into it. You certainly are able to get an appraisal, and a contract that you write in Colorado can be contingent upon an appraisal, even if you have a cash deal. The truth is that once they see that contract, as long as we look at the comps, when we're putting the contract together or listing the property, that's the important piece, is that we can get an appraisal if we do end up getting a appraisal contingency on a contract, which 90% of the contracts have appraisal contingencies that have loans attached to them. So just wanted to kind of sort the appraisal confusion out. Not super exciting here, but if you do have an appraisal issue, if an appraisal comes in low, you do have the ability to negotiate. The buyer does not have to buy the property for more than the appraisal as long as there's a contingency in the contract, and the seller does not have to sell it for less than the contract price. So there's a negotiation piece there. The only other piece of appraisals that comes in is that condition, that subject to stuff. And so you have to know what type of loan you are getting. The appraisal is ultimately an instrument that the lender will use to make sure that the investment is safe, that they are lending the money on. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions about appraisals, if you are a homeowner and are considering an appraisal, we can talk about it. I typically don't suggest, unless you have a super unique property, to get an appraisal prior to listing, because ultimately that's just one person's opinion. If you do have a death in the family and it's an estate, sometime, and you plan on holding that for an investment property, very smart to get an appraisal, even if it's just one of you, so that you can work with that step-up basis from a tax side perspective. And then a loan will obviously usually carry those appraisals. So lots of different places where you can get them. If you have any questions, please let me know. But that is appraisals, pretty much boiled down to that. I hope you guys all have a wonderful afternoon, and thanks so much for joining me. Please like, comment, subscribe, share this with somebody that may have a question about appraisals, and we will see you next time on Why Invest Wednesday. Bye-bye.